now listening to Soundspace, the podcast where we explore the space of sound.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to Soundspace. We hope you had a wonderful holiday and a happy new year. We have a very special interview for you today, but before we get into that, please remember to follow Soundspace on your favorite podcatcher. You can find us on all social media platforms, which will be linked in the description. I would like to add that we are now sponsored by Leza Audio Technologies. They make really cool plugins. So if you're a plugin junkie just like us, go check them out at leza.io. That's LESE.io. With all that said, allow me to please introduce our special guest for today's episode, Dr. Eldad Tsabary. He is a Montreal-based composer, associate professor, chair of the Concordia Music Department, and co-director of the Performing Arts Research Cluster, PARC. He has dedicated his career to the development of electroacoustic music worldwide. As a professor, he has taught ear training, composition, modular programming, music theory, and live electronics at Concordia University, where he also founded the Concordia Laptop Orchestra, also known as CLOrk, which has garnered international attention and is now one of the biggest electroacoustic ensembles in the world. He has also taught many audio-based topics such as synthesis, digital audio theory, Pro Tools, and sound for the image at Musitechnique. Tsabary received his doctorate in music education from Boston University, and as a professor, he has shaped the path of many aspiring musicians, artists, and sound engineers. He has passed down his knowledge in areas such as sound recording, digital audio, MIDI, synthesis, sampling, and much more. Along with his dedication to music and its evolving relationship with technology and synthetic mediums, his composition and performance styles include contemporary, experimental, acousmatic, sound art, and live electronics. His works, in all styles, are created with wide textural and timbral variety with special attention to motion and process. He is undoubtedly a one-of-a-kind individual within the industry who has in many ways pioneered the advancement of the latter into new frontiers. Please welcome Dr. Eldad Tsabary.
Welcome to the podcast, Eldad. How are you?
I'm good. It's the weekend. It's a time I get a little bit of I have a little bit of me time, a little bit.
Yes,
That's good.
Absolutely. And Anthony, how are you?
Been pretty good. Thank you. How about you?
Good. Very good. I'm so excited. Eldad, obviously you taught us both, and now we're here interviewing you on Soundspace. I would say this podcast was conceived on the hopes of one day interviewing you. So we're very excited to have you on. I really just want to waste no time and get to the very first question. When did you first start making music, and what was it about music that made you want to dedicate yourself to it? Because you've obviously been doing it for many years now.
Yeah, well, I don't remember ever not having music and like as a central thing in my life. Growing up, my brothers and sisters have all kind of always played music around me, like prog rock, folk rock, just hard rock, Janis Joplin, Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, King Crimson. And King Crimson kind of grabbed me. I was like so amazed by King Crimson as a kid. And yeah, I think it's for a long time I thought that because of King Crimson, probably, it hasn't changed really. King Crimson is the reason I became a musician eventually. Although at the later days they pissed me off a bit, but but they're still running, right? I started in 1969, and they're still making music. Robert Fripp is a genius. I loved a lot when they had the tension between Robert Fripp and Bill Bruford, who's this amazing drummer, and they didn't get along at all. But at the same time, they were the two longest standing members, and you could hear the tension between them in the music. It was because they're such amazing musicians. The tension made it into just awesome, kind of like constant, not exactly fighting, but just like intensity, in the music that was really good. And I thought that once Bill Bruford left, after the Thrack album, which was kind of a cool concept. Because there were like two trios of drums, guitar, and stick twice, right? So basically you had like these two bands, and one of them was one of the drummers was Bill Bruford, and that was the last time he played. And this album was awesome. And after that was really interesting. I felt that the sound of King Crimson kind of remained, but the energy was lost. And you can't put your finger on it. It's like the rhythms are there, the asynchronous kind of like not asynchronous, like asymmetric meters are there. Everything is as complex, but somehow something in the soul was gone. Anyway, I'm getting off track. So the music has always been kind of like, I grew up into that. It was never a question of whether I'm going to play or, it was more like what instrument I was going to play. And I guess I started at the age of 6 to study the organ, like my brother, Doron. And I really slacked. I didn't practice. And after 4 years, I said, I don't want it anymore. But then after 2 years, I started studying the flute. And the flute sort of got me into more like active performance and this kind of stuff. Also, I guess I started composing songs, and the first song I composed, I basically just wrote on little paper notes. I wrote chords, just threw them and sort of picked them up in random and just like made a sequence of chords randomly, and then I wrote a melody on it. I even remember it until today. It's actually kind of fun. But like since then, I've never really approached music making in any kind of standardized way. Like it's kind of started right there and then, but it's just the way my brain works. So why I dedicated myself to music, I don't think there was ever, well, it's not true that there was never a question. Like there was of course a question when you choose your, like you two, when you choose your life path, you question, your brain sort of gets involved, into like your decision making process, which is reasonable. I mean, like the brain, like what is needed, what will, put bread on my table, what will sustain me for long, all this kind of stuff is really important. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I don't believe in the brain as a long-term decision maker. I think destinations are the job of the heart. Where do I want to go? The brain doesn't tell you where you want to go, right? Where you want to go, that's your heart, and that's, brain helps navigate, but really the boss of who tells you where you should go. I think it's the heart, and that guided me ever. And music has always been like a sort of a critical, central component of all my social life as well. All of my best friends, like we were deeply into music making, listening. We were admiring all these amazing musicians with their skills and courage, and going into sort of crazy harmonic world and rhythmic world and melodies that are unique, and like that sort of gave us a lot of meaning. My best friend from high school, Avi, used to play the I guess he still plays. He didn't become a musician. Eventually became a developer of technology, of computer technology for blind people. He's blind, so he's an amazing tech. He was a sound person. I learned a lot about sound from him. Like at a very young age. In the late '80s, we recorded. He worked as a sound technician in the studio. A lot of the recordings I did were with him. And in high school, we just used to play for all these kind of festivals in the city, and we should give us like a lot of outlets to leave school in the middle of the day and go and rehearse. Even sometimes when there was no rehearsal, we just lied and said there was one, and we'd go and practice, or just go and eat falafel or something. But so it's just music has always been there. It's like kind of a
No, of course. Yeah. Of course. I think it's very evident that music has always been there in what you're describing. But obviously sound is something that you dedicate yourself to it, but it's also something that you create. And so, I really want to get into also your music composition. Your classes were a lot about like ear training and the creation of sound. So I want to know, what rules and concepts do you use to provoke creative sonic ideas as a music composer?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I mentioned that the first thing I ever did was sort of throw notes and write random and sort of compose with a sequence of chords that had some chance in it. And the truth is that every composition, every creation that I ever did had kind of like a new entry point. Like on one hand, yes, of course, with your life being a musician, you develop systems, you develop techniques, you develop quicker entry ideas, strategies, whatever. But I found also that I don't work well with too much predefined stuff. I need to sort of like to get into stuff anew. Every class is a new class. Every creation with people is a new creation. Every creation alone is a new collaboration with the instruments. Is a new collaboration with technology. Is a collaboration with the environment. Like you basically collaborate anew. You negotiate constantly. Another interesting thing I found when I was studying composition in New York is that often if I have an idea about a composition, there is always a crap composition that happens first.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
I need to get through it, and then I get to the good one.
Get it out of the way. For sure.
And it's funny, and like at some point I said like, okay, let's just get quickly through the crap one. I won't give too much attention to it. I'll just do something,
Just
like
4 bars.
Yeah. Sometimes these were actually the better one, so you don't even know, like, yeah. But I remember a particularly funny like lesson in that I when I was still sort of making my way into the world of electroacoustics, and I was submitting things to competitions, to festivals, and I had a commission from CBC to do like a piece. I can't remember how it happened exactly, if I proposed or maybe NASA came to me. NASA is the New Adventures in Sound Art in Toronto. But I wanted to do an interreligious piece. I worked like for 6 months recording in churches, in Buddhist centers, in synagogues, in mosques, actually more outside of mosques, in Jaffa, Ethiopian church in Jerusalem. It was really, and I had interviews with priests. I worked in a soup kitchen, and recorded there. It was a very meaningful experience. And I worked a long time on that, and it sort of generated pieces that are an interreligious kind of mix of radio pieces more than electroacoustics. I mean, there were electroacoustic and there were definitely sound involved, but there were a very clear also textual narrative in that. And I was really proud of how meaningful it was. And I remember sending that to the most important festival competition in the field, the Bourges, and it didn't make it anywhere. It did play, at the NASA festival, so it didn't not do well. But the Bourges was kind of like the top opportunity, and it didn't get it. And then I said, okay, screw that. I did a piece that took me 2 hours to make, and it was called Gastrointestinal Disorder. It was just basically a big fart with sound, and I sent this to Bourges, and this one got a mention. I said, okay, so that shows you, you can sort of spend 6 months on something that you feel so full of, meaning.
Right.
Or I can do a fart piece.
Oh, man. I get that. I can relate to that.
Yeah. There's something about authenticity, it's not. I'm not saying that seriousness can't be authentic, but sometimes we're too serious.
Eldad, I wanted to ask you something about your career aspect. So, it takes a specific type of person to be an educator, and you hold many roles now at Concordia, such as associate professor, chair of the music department. Congratulations to that.
Thank you.
Co-director of the PARC. But it didn't start off like that. Can you give us a little summary of your background in this institution over the time you spent there?
Yes. Interestingly, Concordia felt like home very quickly. I've gone through my educational journey was not a quick one at all. I did 3 years of jazz degree, then 3 years of classical bachelor's. Then I went to 2 years of a PhD in New York that didn't quite work out. Then I went to Montreal, studied a year in music technique, then went and studied 7 years of PhD at Boston University. It adds up to 16 years of being a student. So I've been around and I never felt at home anywhere.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, there was a lot of joy in those studies. I never felt like I didn't want to be there or anything, I appreciated every second, in every one of these places, but I never felt at home. It always felt like I was an alien, sort of doing my best to fit in, to be validated, even it's kind of like somebody who comes from the outside and wants an in kind of thing. And I excelled. Don't get, I'm not saying that I didn't, but it was a lot of hard work, but a lot of joy as well. I enjoyed every moment, like it felt like a privilege, that I'm allowed, and I think there is a history in that, I think, too, which has to do with, I think, growing up in Israel, you always feel, especially when your origins are from an Arabic world, like in my case, Yemenite Jewish, that the culture that you come from is not as high culture as like the one that you study in school, which is all European, primarily European. And you always feel like you kind of like you need to study hard to even validate your existence within this world of thought, right, and culture. And you don't even think about it. You just do it. It's kind of like, oh, of course, Yemenite poetry is not really deep. That's, of course, it's bullshit, right? But it's how you grow up believing. So I think going to university for me was just like a feeling of a privilege that I was even accepted, So there was a good side to that, which made me enjoy, it helped me enjoy like everything, And now I know that it's not right, that there is so much depth and interest in my origins and basically in every culture, the sort of Western culture has this effect on so many places around the world. It's kind of beyond the colonization that happened, through imperialism. There is this colonization of culture and thought that happens everywhere, like in Asia, Southeast Asia, in Africa, of course. And so, Okay, I went far. Your question was much more.
It's okay. Go as far as you want to go.
But basically, when I came to Concordia, weirdly, I was given an opportunity of like teaching the first ever ear training for electroacoustic class at Concordia. I jumped on it, like with a lot of happiness and joy, and like having no idea what it even means, like what shape it's going to take. And I, of course, experimented with it, like I remember that I was kind of worried before the first classes, like, like the fear of just doing something new. Am I going to be a good teacher? Am I going to just be exposed for knowing nothing? And I remember my other self told me, just like, chill. It's just people. It's a group of people, you hanging out, exploring together. Like what's not fun about this? Just like you listen, you discover together. And I allowed myself creativity in that, especially because it was a new course, new field. The person who brought this course to existence is Kevin Austin. Unsurprisingly, he's the brain behind actually starting electroacoustic ear training at Concordia, because he felt it was really necessary. And because of that, I was able to join in and start sort of this journey, which also eventually led to what I did with my doctorate at Boston University. But I was very creative. Like I was reading Al Bregman's auditory scene analysis book, and it's not an ear training book. It's basically a collection of auditory perception studies, that put together a kind of a model or a theory of understanding how our brain organizes sound. And it was really interesting. When I told Al Bregman that I was doing ear training based on auditory scene analysis, he said, "Oh, it's interesting. Like he'd never heard of this. And this is also Kevin. Kevin who kind of like we thought, well, ear training for electroacoustics, auditory scene analysis. So basically, all I knew is this: electroacoustics, ear training, auditory scene analysis. That's all I had to go with." And of course, Kevin had much more much more years of thought about that. But he was kind enough not to throw it on me and sort of allow me to discover it on my own with the electroacoustic students. And what I was amazed was that I just felt at home. Like I felt it wherever my brain wants to go with this was okay. I never felt that in an academic institution before.
That's very special, for sure. For sure. I can really relate to that. As someone who's attended Concordia, I felt very just right from the jump. So I can really relate to what you're saying when you say that.
So that was it. That was 2005. And I realized I'm home. And somehow I knew. Like, obviously I was just teaching one course on a contract. It wasn't like I had anything to hold on to in terms of like actual position, or anything. Just, but I knew, I felt the energy. I felt this was home. And and often this is not how it works with, after people. I didn't even have a PhD. Like I didn't even start it. I just started in 2006. So often when people do a PhD and look for an academic job, they search far and wide, until they find their place. For me, it was kind of like the opposite. I was home. I knew where I wanted to be and I kind of knew where I was gonna be, like without having any actual, something to support it except for feeling. And thankfully, it did work, and I taught 4 years as a part-time, which is kind of like every year you apply for courses and you hope to get them based on seniority and all that. And thankfully, everything worked out. Mike Pinsono was instrumental in guiding me through this process. He was the one who actually invited me to apply to begin with.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Mike,
That's really interesting.
Mike is a dear friend, and I dedicated a big thank you to him in my dissertation as well. And like
good.
I admire this guy. It's like his heart, his brain, his teaching is wonderful.
Of course.
And after that, Kevin went on sabbatical. I applied for an LTA which is like a 1 year kind of full time. It's also the same time I was doing my PhD, and my second daughter was born. It was a very full year, full of concerts and the Oscar Peterson Concert Hall, and it was massive.
Wow, that's very special.
Yeah.
I was really curious about your most recent role as the chair of the music department. What have you learned about yourself, about the position? What have you learned about yourself as you embarked on this project?
Yeah, I see this position as a service primarily. It's like a designated driver kind of thing, because it is a privilege. Like I'm very grateful for it. It's also a responsibility, and I think it's really important. It's a designated driver in the way that you are given the keys to drive the department forward, and to me, it's very important you do it without running anybody over. Which is very easy to do. If you try to do too much too quickly, there's a lot of people in there. Basically heading a department. This is the first position that kind of like, I guess it's the first place where you have a supervisory type of connection with people across different functions, right? Faculty and staff, of different unions, students, of course. So it's really the first place where you actually sort of mix at the university level. So you're at that point where you sort of care for everybody and their needs and their responsibilities. And at the same time, you're the position, the point of connection between everybody in the department and the university, right? So it is really a designated driver kind of role. And there's a lot to learn there in terms of like balance and vision, so you definitely have a vision about what you can do with how you can move forward with different things in the department, but you have to take it carefully because you don't want to either cancel people's work or overstep or do something because people have been at the university for years and have developed certain amazing things that you don't even know, right? That work in certain ways, and it's a very interesting ecosystem. So it's kind of I love the challenge of having to find the right move, the right decision, like every moment. It's kind of high stress in that way. It's the first time ever I got anxiety medicine. I never even thought about this until now, but I'm enjoying it. But as I said in the beginning, I'm enjoying my me time on the weekend more than ever.
Of course. I think it's such a different step from teaching, because Anthony and I had you as an ear training teacher or as a laptop orchestra conductor. And, I remember leaving your lectures very inspired and feeling full of creative ideas. So I want to know, as someone who teaches all those different types of classes and that are very diverse, how do you go about inspiring your students to strive in the creation of electroacoustic music? Because I think how to inspire very well, and it's basically I want to know how you do that, because it's not easy to do, but it comes very naturally to you. You see what I mean?
Yeah, thank you for saying it means a lot. And
of course,
I don't at the foundation of teaching for me is joy. It's so I don't separate things in the brain before I go back to the basics, which is joy. It's kindness. It's a flexible but safe environment for collective, or a new word I kind of I've been using that I like more than collective is multiplicitous exploration, because collective means like we serve the collective, but or something like that. But multiplicitous is more about we are very different. We are very multiple, but we can still be here together in the same space. And we don't need consensus. We just need to be able to do stuff with each other, near each other, respect each other, give each other safety and flexibility to be what you need. And it's not that easy to make happen. And I think most of the time I don't experience this at a perfect flow very often. But this is the ideal of the environment, and from there I find it's not all on me. Like we're in a group doing stuff, right? And and everybody has a say in that group. Yes, there are different functions, So like as a teacher, I'm a designated driver again over there, but it is still it's not my journey, right? I am part of it. It's my journey as well, but it's not only where I want to go.
I think you're trying to say like it's bigger than you as the individual. It's the whole, I think.
Yes, but every one of us in this mix has a big journey on our own, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
very true.
So beyond that, yes, then it comes to the structures of how you do stuff. But I think that when this is there and there is a conversation and there is flexibility, the structure can be built together or can be at least sort of adapted, adjusted together, and the structure itself is flexible. It's not like a firm, which is sometimes tricky, and I know that because I've through the years of teaching whatever I taught, I've always looked for a good balance between structure and openness and flexibility. And sometimes I failed. I gave too much flexibility. Sometimes maybe I tried too much structure. That happened too when I was having too many sort of very, very regular assignments that at some point became a little boring. So it's a constant iterative process of finding this good balance between the flexibility that allows individuals to grow, but enough structure you can actually know that you're moving anywhere. Because without structure, you're just kind of like roaming around. Everybody's going in the forest and disappearing, and so that happens too. So, but then it's always about something human, right? So in ear training, it's a very internal process. It's very abstract and it's very inside us. Like we'll learn to shape our experience and to have more control over its boundaries, its direction, its focus, right? And this is kind of a very abstract thing to do. And it requires this discussion, at the human level of actual experience. And then there is the external part of working with others at the laptop orchestra. You depend on your internal skills to be able to hear what's going on, right? But there is an element there of listening and supporting others, and then taking courage to take leadership and see how this happens. So
right.
I think it's a good combination of things. Like the internal and external kind of aspects of. It's very simplistic, somewhat because we are. One thought that is always on my mind about anything is like, it's not that simple. It's just like in general about stuff in life. And anyone says anything, my brain goes to, it's not that simple. Because we are, very multiplicitous. We are very rhizomatic in network. We are conflicting in ourselves. There is tension between forces inside ourselves all the time. And there's a lot of overlap. But it's nice to map it. We say one deals with the internal, one deals with the external. And, and it's kind of like nice to look at it and gives anchors for conversation and thought.
Absolutely. I think that when you talk about it's not that simple, I can relate to that on a different level. After 1 year of doing this podcast with Anthony and now with Quddus, we think like we try to figure one thing out, and then it's like, well, what about this and what about that and what about this? And we, I think it's so a part of sound. It's embedded in that, and you realize that at every single roadblock that you go through. I think that I now want to transition more into the projects that you do. We have a whole section dedicated to CLOrk. I really want to get into that. But before CLOrk, we got to talk about 60 by 60. What an amazing festival. What a great opportunity for the dance department and the music department to come together. I really want to go over that one. And then if there's other projects outside of CLOrk that you want to highlight, please do. But let's give the due to 60 by 60 because that is one of the greatest experiences an electroacoustic student can just
I have some news about it.
Please.
Oh, spill the beans.
60 by 60 is no more.
Oh,
no. Really?
Yeah, I'm sorry to say, like 60 by 60, you know, you've experienced it. It's been a lot of fun. Like 120 students or so, you know, musicians and dancers and theater putting together this 1 hour of like every minute there's something different happening, different choreography, different composer. And it's been a lot of fun, and especially a lot of fun for audience. I know people really enjoyed this one. And I'm a little sad that it happened. Sort of COVID put a stop to it first, but then although there was dance students wanted to try to do a TikTok kind of version of that because TikToks are like 1 minute clips.
I remember seeing that on the mailing list.
They started, but it didn't actually lift off eventually. But this year, the dance department has changed with a new chair, with a wonderful guy, Jens, and Sylvie, who was sort of championing the 60 by 60 until now. She retired. And Jens and Noah, the chair of theater, we sat and with Angelique Wilkie, who is a dance professor I work with very closely. We sat together and thought about the value of 60 by 60 for like pedagogically. And Jens really wanted to re-examine, and Noah also, because it's been, well, with us, it's been very easy. At the Electroacoustics, we just compose a piece and then it makes its way to stage with this amazing, you know, realization of movement and fun and joy and drama. For us, it's been really good. For dancers and theater, it wasn't as organized within the courses, which made it a little hard sometimes. I think it was wonderful, but at the same time, I also want to do something that is more pedagogically valuable for everybody. That everybody loves what they're doing, and like
I understand that.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
We decided to go another way eventually, and do a course together. So there's going to be an improvisation course that is open for dance, theater, and music students, because improvisation is the one thing that sort of like is a shared
crossover.
Do you mean like a live kind of environment?
Yeah, like it'd be a classroom
for both the musician. Oh wow, that's really cool.
So
that's really cool.
So pedagogically, that made more sense equally, kind of like equitably for all three types of areas. So next year is going to be a shared course of improv course for dance, music, and theater students. I don't know how it'll look like, but you know, and it's going to be every year going to move from one department to another. Next year it's at the dance department.
That's really exciting.
Yeah. So
great.
Something will come, you know, like, I don't know, like in terms of a creation that will be like 60 by 60 in that it involves all three departments. But I don't know if 60 by 60 as it has been will come back. But I did enjoy a lot of, like, you know, I waited for it every year because it was just like a fun show, like every minute something new. There was a lot of really fun and funny things and very abstract, and like it was interesting to see the abstract electroacoustic pieces with drama that was sometimes very fun and funny, and then with dance that were sometimes more abstract as well. But this combination of all of these things just made for a really nice kind of like balanced show where every minute something new came, and it was just light, you know, light and impressive, and like it was wonderful. But something new will come.
Yeah,
of course.
I really looked forward every year to the 60 by 60. It's like submitting or even just showing up to the performances.
Yeah.
My first 60 by 60, I accidentally submitted.
I remember this.
I didn't even realize that I submitted it, and I hear my piece there. It was,
and you loved,
yeah, it was cool.
It was a good experience though to see it.
And then there was another year where I just didn't even submit at all, and it was selected. So that was funny. It was cool.
Yeah, because there's a bank of pieces, you know, from you know, that is sort of from previous years as well. And I don't know, like we may still do some stuff with them, you know, like.
I mean, they're there for that, right? So I don't see why
Yeah.
you wouldn't keep a bank of them. That's really cool. That's really cool. Let's talk about a very, very exciting portion of the interview for myself and Anthony. This is a class that we
Since we're
truly
talking
enjoyed.
about performance.
Yeah, exactly. So let's just talk about CLOrk, the Concordia Laptop Orchestra. I'll just open it up with this question. What was your inspiration and your motivation for even creating such a class? Because the minute I walked into that class, it felt magical. Please tell us everything that's on your mind regarding that. That's a very important point I want to hit on this interview.
Yeah. It was 2010, and there was still kind of like a trend of live electronics, laptop performance, sort of, popping all over. There was not a lot, but there were quite a few laptop orchestras. In 2005, it's when Princeton Laptop Orchestra started, and 1 or 2 years after the Stanford Laptop Orchestra, and actually by the same person, Gay Wang, who went from Princeton and moved to Stanford, opened. So they were kind of similar, but and very different from CLOrk. But there was a thing which was beginning there. Cybernetic Orchestra at McMaster with David Ogborn started in 2010 as well, I think. So it felt like there was an opportunity there for something cool. And I thought in the electroacoustic studies, it was also an opportunity for expanding on the live electronics. It was just starting to happen in 2005, like in the first year electroacoustic class, which was in smaller groups. And it's there's something very cool and very new at the time for electroacoustic and studio composers, right? Because we spend a lot of time in the internal, with ourselves in the studio, exploring, designing sound, trying different processes, really playing with, like, it's almost like practicing your instrument, right? Just like you do it, it's a very alone thing. And playing with others in real time primarily demands a kind of fluency in your skills in sound, in real time sound design and performance. So it's kind of like you've learned all the grammar, you've learned all the vocabulary, or enough at least. Now go out there and have conversations. And
I like the way you said that. Yeah, that's very perfect. The way you put it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I heard that from students early. Like, I did some interviews with CLOrk students, and they were writing like all these concepts that we learned in 205 and 305 in the electroacoustic classes, about texture, about all of that was interesting in theory, but we actually lived it, and suddenly it all made sense when we had to sort of be part of it in a live performance. So it took me a while to get a good understanding of what's available, in this platform, both as an ensemble, as a creative entity, and as a class, because it is both, right? As a creative entity, it performs all over the world in telematic and sometimes on location. Like, recently it performed in the Cambridge Festival. It performed in the Hong Kong-based Free Space Jazz Festival, which was really high prestige and wonderful and really a good experience. And we did that just a few months ago. This was telematic. But so it's become this thing that is known out there, an invited festival and stuff. But at the same time, it is a class, and we learn a lot of things in this environment. But what we learn, like I mentioned before, it really depends on the group, and always trying to find a balance for all the voices, in the group to have an expression. It doesn't always happen. Often, either not feel safe enough or just like sort of being swallowed in the crowd, because it is a lot of people. It's the largest orchestra I know. I don't know any laptop orchestra that's 25 to 30 people. It's
Right.
Yeah, no, it was always big sounds, and I feel like every Reaper channel needed at least 3 limiters each,
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
And interestingly, because you've been in the orchestra and you remember how hard it is to hear yourself.
Yes.
The monitoring is an issue that is always a consideration. During COVID, when the orchestra went telematic, this was fixed. Everybody could hear themselves just fine. At first I started in smaller groups of 5-6 people because I didn't know how telematics would work with 25 people. But when we tried full orchestra, it was marvelous. It was actually the best ever because of that. People could hear themselves and everybody could mix just as much as they wanted. So that's something to take away and bring into the physical domain. We'll see how this works.
Do you think it'll ever go back to the physical domain, or?
Yeah, last year we did. Last year we were first.
Okay.
First half we did 2 telematic things, one at the Cambridge Festival, and one just like a Concordia performance. And then we did 2 performances that were on location, although in a mixed kind of way. Interestingly, one was wild. It was in the EV building, the 10th floor. It was part of my other project that I wanted to mention, my Rise project. The Rise is a cataclysmic mini opera project that's been going on with like about 20 people. And every year, if it matches, like the mini opera's production or creation, use or collaborate with the laptop orchestra. And that's what we did last year with this Dream. Like it was a piece proposed by Valentina Plata, with an electroacoustic student. And she wanted to do an enactment of a lucid dream. And I
like that.
Yeah, and the idea was, it's kind of like an opera, but a very wild Dada type of opera.
Okay.
The idea was that we were talking about crisis related to technology, and the various aspects of technological crisis could be anywhere from AI takeover to, in this case, was more like kind of looking at it from the other side. Technology and surveillance is basically taking over everything. Our imagination is no longer ours. We don't have the freedom, to just be unseen. The only place where our imagination is fully free and ours is in a lucid dream. So we were enacting that by having like 40 people in 3 rooms. Everything was wireless. So singers with wireless microphones, the laptop orchestra was all wireless. No matter where you played from, everything was heard in all of the space. People were setting up inside tents, with all their gear. There was a fortune teller walking around. There was one of the laptop orchestra performers was actually painting on a canvas. Everybody was in costume. There were like amazing costumes. There was like masks that were created for the event by one of my research assistants, Una, hanging on the wall. And inside these masks, there was a Bluetooth speaker reading lines from Dream Journal. So you'd walk in the past, and this mask will talk to you from the wall, saying something from a dream.
Oh, that's trippy.
This whole thing was a mad trip. Like 40 people, everybody doing whatever they want to do. And the laptop orchestra was part of that. And it was like very, very wild, sonically, very wild visually.
That's really cool. Eldad, maybe it's just me, but I don't know. I feel like our collective passion or even obsession with sound has its roots for our love in music. And I think that CLOrk really expresses that. Can you tell us what have been some notable music tendencies or technological innovations or even artists that you've seen arise from events like CLOrk?
Yeah, I think the things that emerged in CLOrk are so many, and I think that one interesting thing that happens is that like we do very highly technological designs basically in every performance. It's like one thing I've realized really works well for us every year is like short-term deadlines with very high ambition. That's kind of like the formula for this madness, like for these really wild, innovative things to happen. Overly prepared and overly planned things don't seem to get as much creativity and as much actually success as you'd think in this context. So with that, I think we don't really think too much about the innovations in terms of like the tech, in terms of like the creation, like, or not in a sustainable way. I mean, we can go back and sort of analyzing, and I'm actually doing this right now because I'm writing a book chapter about orchestration in the laptop orchestra. And I sort of like it just forces me to go back and think about all of these things that we're doing musically that need some definition. And it's a really interesting exercise. This book it's the Oxford Handbook of Orchestration, which is like, it's not electroacoustics, orchestration overall. And the chapter that I was invited to write is about orchestrating the laptop orchestra, which is kind of cool because this has not been written about anywhere. So it forces me to go and actually answer your question, like about what kind of musical arrangements have emerged in all that. But for the most part, we don't think about it. Like
we don't.
And we don't even think about the tech. We're doing like massively complex tech. We don't even think about it because it's just like a channel for us for the creative, artistic, musical thing that we're trying to do.
Yeah.
But if we try to analyze it, I think we've learned, we build textures, in kind of like organized way, like we have those textures that are, drone is kind of like a given, like I remember when CLOrk played at Acousma, so like people came to me and said, because we played an acousmatic performance rather than a drone performance at Acousma, and it was kind of like weird because acousmatic performances are very linear and very kind of like temporal and causal, like something happens as a result, right? It's very different from these very droney kind of like pads and spaces that are very slow to evolve. It was like more like an actual composition. And people came, like composers from the Conservatoire said, how is it possible? How can you have an orchestra play an acousmatic piece? And it was all improvised. But people were ready, ready to, when somebody goes like, whoop, they know to do like, toing at the end, And,
and there was all your movements that you would also do. You would give us like pointers of like this. I remember, we're audio only here, people, but you would put your left hand up and then your right arm like horizontally, and then you would just raise it leaning towards your left arm, and that would mean like dynamically, let's get louder. I think that when you talk about organized textures and improvisation with drones.
Soundspace is proudly sponsored by Leza Audio Technologies. Use code SOUNDSPACE for 30% off any purchase. Transform your sound with Glow, a mass granulator, or with the modern degradation of codec by visiting leza.io today.
It leads me to the next question. How would you describe group improvisation in electroacoustic music, in the context of electroacoustic music, and how does it differ from anything outside of electroacoustic music? And I mean, that's basically everything else as far as I'm concerned. I think those two are, they contrast so much, and your mindset plays between the two. So I would really be interested to know your answer.
Yeah, that's a good question. And what you described, the sound painting, it's a system of conducting. It's actually called conduction. Was a good entry point. Was a really good entry point. I remember like Caci Kennedy asked me before the first laptop orchestra, how are you going to make sure like it's not going to be a big ball of noise? And that kind of made me think. And that's why I went into sound painting as a channel, because it's a way to communicate, centralize kind of the attention of the improvisation. But I actually moved away from that, because after about 2 years or maybe more, actually 4 years, I think, of doing that as kind of like a main entry point for the laptop orchestra improvisation, I realized that I'm also missing out on the very ground up sort of like process, which is sometimes more messy and a little more challenging. But until we try to do it, we don't get good ideas of how we can do it. When CLOrk played in Acousma, there was no conductor. There was all, just a group in a very balanced collective way coming together, and everybody knew their role. Everybody designed their own role. It just worked in the most perfect way it ever has. And I think what I've discovered through the years, because right now, CLOrk jumps into music making very quickly. It used to be that it took it some time to figure out how to be together. Now that Cambridge Festival performance that I told you about happened in the very first class, because that was a date, and we just said like, okay, we're gonna do the impossible. Just like the first time we meet, we're gonna perform in a prestigious festival with 100,000 people. Like
pressure is on. Everybody's watching.
and that was cool. That was cool because they made it happen, and it was great. And I think what I've learned, if I simplify or just put it into one pointer, is you got to know what's going on in order to improvise well. So, and that I realized was something that held a lot of good improvisation, is that most of the time people just had no idea what the hell is going on. What are we doing? And then like after about 15, 20 minutes, something sort of emerges and people follow, and then like it all goes well. So if you can actually make it so that right from the start, everybody knows what's going on, then you don't need to do anything almost. So strategies for that were like, okay, let's start with one person. One person improvises. Improvise for 1 minute. That one person will develop their own story, and then everybody would join in, either gradually or together or whatever, but they'll join in something coherent. And from when that happens, the coherence remains, and just like, I don't need to tell anyone anything, it just happens. Then what's missing, and that's the other part of this thing, the strategy and improvisation that evolved, is shifts. Because it's very easy to support something that's going on, but how do you go somewhere else in the middle of that? And that requires a lot of risk, by individuals. Like somebody screaming suddenly. Like it could either just be fall on their face, nobody follows, and they just screamed and nothing happened, or they can have the orchestra support this and sort of build on that, and then it's like, So the being together part now comes in just like that. Once we know how to enter, it's not work, because everybody in the orchestra is already after 2 years of ear training and electroacoustics, and like they're very sharp and they're very skilled in their ears and to varying levels with their tech.
I thought it was funny what you were saying, because laptop orchestra is improvisation essentially, and it reminded me, like last week I went to like an improv show where the viewers, me, were able to contribute. So I actually went up on stage and was able to perform some improv with some complete strangers. And like you said, like the key to improv is absolutely listening to what's going on around you. Because if you're not listening, then there's no communication.
Yeah, and of course, what you're telling me is a very well-rooted tradition of jam session in jazz.
Yeah,
so that's this open jam sessions is something that's existed in jazz forever. Which is wonderful, kind of a community. I don't know if you know that the Concordia Jazz, they have like every Wednesday,
right,
an open jam session at the upstairs bar. Anyone can come and play, and it's really wonderful actually. But there is a lot of improvisation obviously in the laptop orchestra has other kind of parameter of sound, because it's not that jazz is not about sound. Jazz is very much about sound as well.
Sure.
But in jazz, you have swing, you have particular harmonic language, particular phrasal, melodic language, and rhythms. In electroacoustics, it's something else. But the culture of improvising and supporting each other is very similar. And in some ways, it's for jazz, it's just like in their bones. For us as the electroacoustic people, it's a discovery. And it's like, it's an opening up, like we open our heart,
Yeah.
So that's cool. I didn't, where is this thing that happened, by the way?
It was in Toronto. It was the second city. There was just an improv show that happened. And I went, I went to the show and put your name in a hat, and they pick my name out of a hat, and they're just like, okay,
they're like,
go.
oh, this guy's got an electroacoustic bachelor's degree. Let's pick his
Go
name.
do some CLOrk. No, I'm kidding.
What did
Go ahead, perform.
What did you play? Was there a sound?
No sound. It was just
It's more.
it was just pure improv, just up on stage.
Yeah, like theater. Like theater.
Yeah,
Amazing.
theater. Yeah, sorry, I should have been more clear about that.
Yeah, and
but it is connected.
Very. And I just had an event, a closed event with my RISE group, the opera group, a couple of weeks ago, that we did exactly that. Like it wasn't music. It was 3 different types of play that is improvisatory. One of the people in the group, she's doing a PhD in dance, Danielle, and she's developed this practice of tethering. She comes from circus. She was an aerialist in Cirque du Soleil, and she does she took the fabrics of what you usually hang from the ceiling, and instead she does like horizontal tethering. So like now it's like instead of tethering it to or rigging it to the ceiling, it's tethered to another person. So people in a group with a very, very long fabric are basically improvising with each other by movement only. So pulling, pushing, and it's a very beautiful kind of process of very somatic, very physical. So that was one thing, and very different type of improvisation. Then another member of RISE, who's a visiting PhD student from Glasgow, Adriana, did this beautiful thing with vocal improvisation that is non-linguistic. So basically speaking, conversing in different kind of gibberish and gestural sounds and with movement. And that was kind of like very open and very freeing also very stressful at the same time.
Right.
And
For sure.
and then we did a DVT session with Mira, who's a drama therapist who does DVT is developmental transformation. It's a process of, it can be therapy, but it doesn't have to be.
Okay.
It's basically play. It's like taking adults into a play situation like kids. So we imagine things, we draw things, we, like, like she would say something like, I don't know, like a mushroom on the floor, and and she'll start sort of like talking like kids do, like make believe kind of thing, right? Like you look at something, oh, look at this mushroom, it's huge, and then like you go under the mushroom and like it's all in a, so like you do it as adults.
That's a lot of fun.
It's wonderful.
Yeah. You let the child out.
So we did, yeah.
Yeah,
So-
exactly.
So I think this kind of stuff is good for CLOrkies as well, because one thing that we aren't is somatic. We're very brainy. We don't actually use our body a lot in our performances, in our improvisation. We're stuck in the cyber world. Like we are actually inside the computers when we improvise, and our ears. Like we're in a very abstract domain of thought and hearing. And it shows, because you look on people on laptop orchestra performance, they're often sitting very crouched, like insects on. They don't look very, like very free in terms of the body, but we're very wild.
No, they look very concentrated.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we're deep
yeah.
somewhere in the abstract, and then we're together.
Absolutely.
There. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think deep in the abstract is the perfect segment to the next question I want to ask you. It's all about mindset. Outside of what you've described already with CLOrk and all the other projects, what would you say is the mindset required to create electroacoustic music?
I think it's many things. The first thing, I think it's like a sonic Play-Doh. Like you, it's like it's that kind of free and formless, and you can form it in the way that you want, as long as you create something. But you can play with it. It can shape it. You can change it from one form to another form. I think with skill and time, it becomes more like clay. In a way that it is kind of like more precise, more detailed. But the point I'm trying to make here is that it's, yes, there are traditions and there are different styles of people doing things. There are people who come from soundscapes. There are people who come from acousmatics. And each one kind of develop its own language. But the basic of all of them is this: you are designing your sound, and then you're creating, designing it at a micro level, how you layer things to make them sound in a certain way, how you shape their beginnings and endings, and the way they behave in the middle. But then also in a larger scale, you shape them into textures, you shape them into sort of interesting relationships. You make a narrative of some type, but it's not like music. It doesn't have to come with discrete, sort of boundaries like notes or meter, right? And of course, it's not that simple. I'll say again. Of course, in music, you can go very electroacoustics with instruments, right? And I find it when you guys, the electroacoustic people like us go into the more instrumental composition classes. I've seen the most amazing pieces in instrumental compositions come from electroacoustic students, because of this kind of like you approach this world from the world of sound, and from the world of sort of playing with with the parameters of sound, with the experience in timbre, in space. And space is a pretty deep thing.
So deep.
I've been recently thinking about the laptop orchestra orchestration, really thinking a lot about space, and especially because the loudspeaker is a very limited, like bodiless type of sound, right? If you compare a clarinet coming from a loudspeaker or clarinet coming from a clarinet, they're not the same. Even though, and one has a body, one doesn't, right? Doesn't matter how clean and how clear and wonderful the speaker is. One actually has a body; it's there. The other is like a ghost. And I'm not even talking about a stereo image. Just coming from one speaker, it still doesn't have the same presence that a real instrument near you has. And I thought a lot about this, like why? So in some ways, it's a limitation of this laptop orchestra, or basically the loudspeaker orchestra, if you want to call it that. It doesn't have to be a laptop, as long as it comes from a loudspeaker. It loses its body. But at the same time, you have such freedom to take these ghostly sounds and spread them in such cool ways, sounds to the ceiling, speakers facing the ceiling, speakers at different levels, like around you, like doing the dome. So you have the freedom of this virtual world to play with. But one thing we can't quite get to is physical presence.
Absolutely.
And that's I remember we had a show with at McGill one time, and we were considering, but we really want to finish the piece very strong. How can we really immerse people with our sound at the end? We can't. Can't make a big sound that will really immerse everybody. We'll just bring a real cymbal, just to bang it at the end, or something like that, because something. And I have some ideas about why it's like that from the speakers, but I think it's less important right now. What's important is that it's a different mode of spatial arrangement. And as sound designers, electroacoustic people, we think about these things, and we can enjoy the spatial aspect of instruments versus speakers, and have that as a contrast, right? We can have the spatial difference between a very immersive, reverberant sound, sort of flushed into the walls, compared to very pinpointed point source. These kind of things that only us think about, but they have extreme power on our experience of as a listener, right? And as musicians, you don't typically think about that. You do later on, but we come to sound from this point.
Absolutely. And I think when you talk about all of these different spectrums where electroacoustic music can be manipulated, whether it be dynamically and spatially, I think that one element I've always noticed in electroacoustic music versus any sort of organized sound is the unpredictability of it and how it constantly evolves. There's a sonic idea, and it's Danielle Savage spoke a lot about this in her interview. I wanted to know, how do you go about preserving unpredictability in your creative sonic ideas? You see what I mean? Because it has to always evolve, and it's always going to be on a new level when you want to evolve that sound. So how do you go about that?
Yeah, and I think by unpredictability you're talking about the element of
surprise.
Surprise, yeah. So which I think is not completely unpredictability. I mean, if it's unpredictable completely, it's so I think it's more drama. If like in a way that which is a mix of predictable and unpredicted, kind of like you're developing expectations, and then you don't meet them, and it's like a good storytelling, right? So it's a good question. There are many strategies to do that, both at the micro sound design level, because if a sound is not interesting internally, then it just dies, and at the level of composition in time, right? And I think with live coding, I find this to be a particularly interesting challenge that I enjoy playing with, because when you live code, typically, it doesn't have to be, of course, there are other ways to do it, but typically you work with a loop kind of process, right? So you code something, and then it goes into a loop. It gives you time while it's still playing to start changing things. But sometimes that can get very, if it takes you too long to change or to add a layer or to do whatever, it goes into this stagnant mode, right? So what you do in live coding is you begin by already writing a code that has some algorithmic kind of variation in it, right? It drops a note every randomly out of the eight notes, maybe one will drop every second bar or something. You don't know which. You add a process of a filter opening and closing in an asynchronous kind of format. So if the bar is 4 beats, maybe the cycle of the filter will be 11 beats, something like that. And so then things things of different pacings and different cycles start interacting with each other. Basically, Steve Reich kind of was built in a very minimalist way, built all around the interaction of different timings, right? So you can add that to different things.
At a certain point, wouldn't that be still, wouldn't that eventually become a pattern? I remember once you told us that if you keep having the element of surprise constantly come into the performance, it will eventually become a pattern and it will be expected. So, I mean,
you're right. And I mean, if it's always if every time you prepare something you surprise, like every time you do a deceptive cadence, every single time you have a 5, you go to a 6,
Yeah.
something like that. Then of course it becomes a pattern. But then you go to a 1, and then it'll be like so. Then it comes to the higher level of sort of storytelling, really, right? So the layering part, the complexity internally, gives you a little bit more time, because things are interesting, they're very active internally, kind of like you simulate life by adding complexity. But of course, you still need to do some changes at some point. Even in Steve Reich's pieces, there is like this thing happening, and then it cuts and starts a new process, because, yes, just being a good storyteller in that way.
Right. Absolutely.
I think it's interesting that you mentioned live coding. So as you're exploring and developing technological tools such as ear training and live coding, like you said, did you find any resistance from people who are skeptical about implementation of technology in music?
It's a funny question. It's of course, there's always resistances, just people. But my take on this is I have a very strategic forgetfulness. I don't really remember. I don't really store those moments when there is resistances. I just do whatever and just move forward, and I just do it anyways. I can't pinpoint moments like that because I really don't store them. I find it look, like especially where I am. I'm at a university, right, and universities are kind of like publicly funded places of knowledge. Not only dissemination, not only sharing and teaching, but also knowledge generation.
Right.
Like it's a very fortunate place to be if somebody who's very curious, because it's your job to push the envelope and to try different things, and you always find justification for that. That's what research is. So maybe if I were more living in the industries, there maybe be more resistance to that. More like even there, it would be sort of a profit-based more than sort of holding on to a dogma. But in university, it's just like a perfect place for trying things and pushing the envelope and sometimes failing, but then it's part of the process, of moving forward.
Right.
So yeah, so I don't remember those things. I ignore them.
Okay. So as somebody who is just starting off my audio career and I guess relatively starting our careers off, I've looked at you as a mentor in my audio career, and I'm sure to many others as well. And as Jaian and I have created this podcast, honestly, we created it because we wanted the opportunity to talk to interesting people, but also because we thought students and aspiring musicians and sound engineers might benefit from learning directly from people in this industry. I'm sure that in your years as a professor, you must have met many talented and remarkable individuals. What were some traits or characteristics you consider essential to thrive as students and later as professionals?
Yeah. Thank you for saying, by the way, like I appreciate it. And I feel really privileged actually, by meeting you two, but throughout for many years, obviously seeing not as many years as Kevin yet, but I have been at Concordia now for 18 years. So it's like I've definitely seen people at different stages of their development and evolution and growth, career-wise, family-wise, and it's always very inspiring to see. I think we learn a lot from each other and about ourselves through each other, and the journeys that people are making. And so to answer more specifically, the way I see it, I guess I'll speak first from my own experience, sort of like growing, as a academic, professional, whatever. I really believe that joy is kind of like a crucial, not just for our health. Mm-hmm. It's a very pragmatic aspect of our growth and our success. Like it's just contagious, like when you allow yourself to feel the joy of what you do because you love it, and sometimes the joy of just like learning stuff that is outside of you. It can be challenging and all that, but even through the struggle, there's joy. I think it's not about showing joy. It's not about that, showing joy so people like you and they want to hire you. It's not this. It's like the joy of like a real joy of like you're doing something that is special because you chose it, because your heart chose it. And it's contagious. Like when you live that, it just opens up. It's like it opens up the universe. It's almost, like sort of a law of attraction kind of thing. Maybe not almost. Maybe that's what it is. And so I think this is like more important than everything as a foundation. I don't know. Maybe it's hard, and I don't want to say something that is exclusive, because for some people joy is hard. At least at some point in their lives or in their mental health, it's not always available because sometimes things are very hard. But I think there's something to aspire for, like to remember, that you are doing it from the heart. So maybe if not joy, then meaning. And I think that what I see from successful people, and there've been a big list of very successful students and graduates and alumni. It's hard to identify one thing, obviously, because people have succeeded in different ways, in games, in films, in TV, in bands, some went to be university or CEGEP teachers, some went to do PhDs and went on the academic career. Like there is a multidisciplinary artist. There is a lot of ways to succeed and be a career, like have a career. Like I always go back to my first student, actually in the 2005 year training, that stood out in class 10 and still stands out as a very unique, worldwide known artist, Navid. Navid Nawab.
I've heard the name sounds familiar. I'm not gonna lie. I think the name sounds like something you mentioned before.
Yeah, he's a special guy. He's his own kind.
I'll be sure to look him up.
Please do. Like he builds these crazy things. His brain is just he's a genius. And that's a very sort of like unique way of success, right? It's not going to work for Ubisoft, which of course many students have done that too. But what I've noticed in all of these that I could put together is it didn't happen right away, but it happened at some point at least. There was this like understanding that this is my journey. I own it. The studies are part of it. The studies is not about, it's like, it's for some reason the way education works in our society is a bit stupid. And because we grow up as kids into high school and all, it's like, and because it's not a place of joy, education in general, which kind of like makes it hard to own it. And to be with it, because you're always in opposition mode. I'm trying, and I'm being judged, I'm being evaluated, I'm being forced to do these things, or I don't pass, I'm devalued, whatever, and
right.
I don't think it's a good system, but it's our reality. And at university, when people break away from that and they realize, oh shit, this is my choice. This is actually, I'm here because I wanted to be here, and this is my thing. I'm gonna own it and take it, and like it's not about getting an A+. I'm gonna get an A+ because I can and I want to, but it's not about that. It's about me excelling in my craft and in what I want to do. So I could see the transition sometimes. Students who came sometimes from either failed in different departments because they went there with the pressure of parents or whatever, or society or whatever, and sometimes on a failed, conditional, almost expelled level. Like we would accept into the program and fight for the university to let them stay sometimes. And Kevin has been sometimes there were cases like that too. And then they come to the program and wow, they become like some of our best students. And they just like kind of like lift off from there.
That's amazing.
And sometimes in the program itself, people who had like I have some people in mind. I won't mention names, of course, but people who were on one hand very enthusiastic about everything, but they never did the work, so they were failing their courses just because they wanted to do only what they find interesting. And they would go to conferences and stuff. They were really excited about all this kind of stuff, but it just didn't know how to balance the work. I remember like telling one of the students who's now a superstar, telling them like, I can see you really love this stuff. With these grades, you won't make it. You want to go to a master's, to a PhD, that's not going to cut it. And that apparently made a difference. And then like suddenly, it just happened. And that's amazing. And they went and got their PhD, and like, it's interesting. It's like, it's a growing up quickly. kind of thing.
I often think about
Absolutely.
the decisions that people make that take them through different paths, and it doesn't matter. Like there could be the strangest path, and it leads them to success. I wonder if you could tell us about a decision you made or didn't make that you felt derailed you in the moment, or perhaps even shook your confidence.
Shook my confidence for sure, but again, my strategic forgetfulness doesn't like to tell the story of derailment, because I think that the process of growth is just naturally happening with errors. Even evolution requires errors, for variations, in order to move forward. So I can say one story that was hard for me at some point along the way, but I know now like how important it was for me to actually do it. I went to do a PhD in music composition in New York, straight from my bachelor's, and that was kind of like, at the time it looked like a good choice. I can go straight to PhD, from bachelor's. I can skip the master's. It's all good unless you don't finish it, and then you are left with no masters and no. That happened to me. Like after 2 years, I realized, well, this is not exactly me. I didn't do badly. I did well, actually. My GPA and everything was fine, but I was a bit lost about what is it? What am I doing here? This is not what I want exactly. It was a lot of very cool abstract things that I could not quite. I enjoyed, doing them like crossword, like very complex crossword puzzles, but not as meaningful things. And I also looked at the teachers around me in the university I was in, which was a very high ranked, like it was the number 3 PhD in composition in the US. Like was really highly ranked. So it was prestigious and all that, but I just felt I had no idea what I was doing. Like, what is it for?
Right.
So I left after 2 years and we moved to Montreal. And then the story of derailment definitely was in my head. Like I felt like,
yeah,
I had 2 years of a PhD, but I have nothing to show for it. Like I only have a bachelor's. All of my dreams, I want to teach. I want to, I'm kind of stuck right now. What am I doing? However, my wife is an awesome, inspirator, inspiring, just basically very wise. She told me you want to compose. You want to send pieces, you want to have your pieces performed, just send them out. You want to teach, you apply to teach, you don't have to feel like you kind of like you're at a dead end, and
that's a nice support.
And with Mike Pinstono that I mentioned. Yeah. And Mike Pinstono, who believed in me, said you should apply for this course. And without having a master's or a PhD, I applied to teach that ear training class, and it happened. I got the opportunity. And it's only when I stopped sort of thinking about this as derailment. It just said okay, something didn't work, but I had to go there to see. And now I'm looking back, and I love that I went there, because it kind of it weaved the journey where it took me. I don't know if you know this. There is this beautiful metaphor. There is a rabbi who is telling a story about how do lobsters grow. Just look up on the internet. Look on YouTube. How do lobsters grow?
I'll look that up.
How do lobsters grow?
Check it out. You know what I'm talking about. But it's
linked in the description, guys.
Yeah. It's basically it is about how pressure, stress, what we feel as pain, is kind of like a huge part of our transformation, and vulnerability, is kind of is part of that as well. Yeah, I would throw away the word derailment, because I think we don't go on a track. We are mapping our world, our path, in this.
It's a path, yeah.
So the path can be slalomy. It can go into the woods. It can go down into the river, But it's if we go down the river and we come back, it's not like the river wasn't meaningful. Right, we were there. Something happened there. We felt some things. We remember some things. So,
absolutely. Eldad, I am feeling like I'm in a lecture all over again. What you're saying is so true, and I think there's valuable lessons in here that graduates from the electroacoustic program, such as myself and Anthony, can really pull from. Even though we're hosting, I feel like I'm currently listening to this, and I'm feeling very inspired. And I really think that the electroacoustic program is a source of infinite possibility when we meet minds like yours. And I met Anthony at Concordia, and we very quickly saw a great connection between the two of us, and we grew and we learned and we fed off each other, and it's great for that. And if it weren't for that and people like you, we never would have created this podcast. So for that, I want to say thank you, and I feel very inspired by what you're saying right now. And I think that this is the perfect place to just ask we have a tradition here where we ask the final question, and the question is, what is your advice to people who want to get into the space of sound? I think that this, you've pretty much said all the way through, but I want to see, just take it home for us. What is the value of this place? What does it represent to you? Let's really answer it to the fullest.
Yeah, and I don't know if I have anything mind blowing, but I would just say, listen, learn techniques, but one at a time. You don't have to jump, to the top right away. Just enjoy every one of them. Collaborate is huge, as you guys are doing. That you inspire each other, and you plug yourself into the communities that interest you. For collaboration, for getting ideas, for pulling each other, and and one thing I understood, electroacoustics has been my path, and the thing that sort of brought me into this world of exploration. It's not really about electroacoustics. To me, it's about people. I go through what what I love.
Yeah.
It's. I love sound, and I've always loved sound. I've always, even as a little kid, I listened to music. I love the music, but I love the sound of the music. And I realized when something didn't sound right, it didn't, what I considered as a young kid as, it's not a good quality. Now I look back and I can remember the sound, and I know it wasn't even about timbre, about or noise. It was about space, right? It was just when the space was incoherent. From a record playing something and the space was phasey and weird, even if the timbre was fine, that's usually what stood out, so understanding, living in this perception of sound is just natural, is me, it's always been me. So this is my channel into the world of people, right? But it really is about people eventually, It's about...
Absolutely. It is all about people. I think that is something that's so true, so very true. Eldad, I want to thank you.
Yeah.
For coming on the Soundspace, for kicking us off on this second year of doing this. I don't think that we could have started off on a better tone as to the energy you bring, the mindset you have.
Definitely. I was so happy when you responded and you said yes, that when you agreed to come on.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. I really feel honored, and it's been fun.
Yeah, it's been a blast. It's been absolutely amazing. If people want more of this and want to contact you or want to converse with you, where can people find you online? Where can they follow you?
Yeah, always. People can just email me, or find me on Facebook. But I think just finding me at Concordia and emailing me, I'll be very happy, and to even set up meetings and stuff. Show you around the program. So. It's very open door.
Absolutely. We'll leave a link to your Concordia email in the description so people can contact you. Anthony, where can people find you?
You can find me on most social medias, but I'm most active on Instagram. That's at acaci.audio. And you can find my website at acaci-audio.com.
Perfect. I'm at Jaian Music on social media, and my website is jaianmusic.com. The artwork for this podcast is provided by GoPro Keo. He's done all of our thumbnails, all of our logos and everything. He's amazing. We thank him so much. We also want to remind you to go check out our sponsor, Laser Audio Technologies. Eldad, it's Aiden. Aiden Baker has his own plugin development company.
Oh, sweet.
And he's killing it.
Yeah, he's such a talented guy.
Very talented. He's sponsoring us. Yeah. I mean, you heard the message play halfway through the show, but I'm reminding you guys, use code Soundspace, get 30% off any plugin that you purchase there. And you can follow Soundspace on social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. We're on every single podcatcher. Give us a 5-star review. We appreciate all of your feedback. And of course, anchor.fm/Soundspace is where you can find all of our episodes too. So for myself, Eldad, and Anthony, this has been another episode of Soundspace. Bye, everyone.
Cheers.
Bye.